This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with David Meerman Scott, and we speak about newsjacking, the new rules of communication, and being in the moment with your marketing. Enjoy this episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have David Meerman Scott. David Meerman Scott is an internationally acclaimed strategist whose books are must-reads for professionals seeking to generate attention and grow their businesses. He is the author of 10 books, 3 of which are international bestsellers. Indeed, The New Rules of Marketing and PR is now in its 5th edition, has been translated into 28 languages, and is required reading at hundreds of universities and business schools worldwide. Meanwhile, as a keynote speaker, he has delivered keynotes in 7 continents and over 40 countries to companies including Cisco, PwC, Ford, Google, and Nestle Purina. And it's my great pleasure to have David on the show today. So welcome, David.
Hey, James. Great to be here. How are you doing?
Very well. And share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now then.
So I'm getting excited to do a presentation tomorrow for the Public Affairs Council. That's in Washington, D.C. And I'm really psyched about it because I'm going to do a full presentation on why Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. So traveling to Washington, D.C. to do that is really going to be fun for me because I'm a huge U.S. presidential politics geek and actually went to a whole bunch of events because I live in Boston, and just north of Boston, about an hour, is the state of New Hampshire. And New Hampshire, of course, is the first primary state, and New Hampshire was also a swing state during the general election. So I had an opportunity to see Hilary Clinton 3 times, Donald Trump twice, and some of the other candidates as well, including Bernie Sanders. And so I'm really geek out about the whole marketing and public relations and sales aspect of U.S. presidential politics.
And you must also be interested, being a keynote speaker yourself as well, seeing how these politicians deliver their messages, how they use maybe some tricks of the trade in terms of speaking.
It is really, really interesting, yes. So that is definitely something that I focus on. I mean, for example, you might not realize this, but Hillary Clinton is a selfie ninja. Oh, my God, it's so interesting. So I went to one of her events, and I was in the very front row. And what she does is, unlike every other candidate or unlike any other person I've ever seen who's happy to let you do a selfie with them, Hillary Clinton actually takes your phone out of your hand and shoots the picture herself. And the reason she does that is because it makes the line go so much faster. So I just thought it was incredibly interesting that Hillary Clinton not only is efficient on her use of time in getting those selfies, but she recognizes the importance of the selfie because everyone who gets one shares it on their social networks, and they're reaching 1,000 or more people each time. So I thought that was really cool. Donald Trump, however, particularly interesting around his use of real-time communications. So every single rally he did, he made news. He said something or did something he had never done before, which was a really cool strategy to make sure that you're constantly in front of the news, constantly being talked about. So I learned something from each of the candidates. It was really fun.
And he was using a strategy I know that you use. I think the very first time I heard about your work was through a live stream that Tony Robbins was doing. And you were speaking on one of his stages, and you were talking about newsjacking, which I hadn't really heard that phrase before. And it was really fascinating to see because it was around about the same time as the presidential elections were happening. And as you mentioned that, and you talked through, okay, this is how to do it, and this is the when to do it. As I started seeing more and more news stories, they're newsjacking. So for someone that doesn't know about newsjacking, what is that? What does it mean?
So the basic idea of newsjacking, which is a concept I pioneered, is that you understand what's going on in the news, and then if there's a news story that's breaking right now, something that's coming out right this instant, you create content that if you have an area of expertise that you can draft off of that news story and provide additional information. So it's basically a technique to get tons of attention to you and your business because you know something about a news story or you have a humorous take on a news story. So for example, what Donald Trump did to Newsjack, and this is where I was talking about it with the election, is during the Democratic National Convention, which is the most important part of the presidential election campaign for the Democratic candidate Hilary Clinton, when she gave her speech, the most important 1 hour of her entire campaign, Donald Trump was live tweeting her speech. So he was newsjacking Hillary Clinton's biggest moment. So her biggest moment, she was supposed to get all of the attention. Every news story was supposed to only be about Hillary Clinton and how her speech went. But instead, Donald Trump, by live tweeting Hillary's speech, made sure that he got quotes into every one of the stories that was written about the speech. So it's an incredibly clever way to take advantage. But any of us can do that. Any of us can do that. So you just look and see what's going on in the news. So it could be a local story, a national story, an international story, or a story about your industry or your area of expertise. And then you create content that gets your ideas into the marketplace. I'll give you one more example related to the election. Is I mentioned earlier that I'm a real geek about the presidential election, the marketing aspects of it, and I've been writing about it a lot. So when Donald Trump won in November of 2016, it was a big surprise for a lot of people. Not so much for me. I basically predicted it because he was the best marketer. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, right after they called the election for Trump, I wrote a blog post that the title was "The Best Marketer Has Become President." And so that blog post ended up getting tons of attention because people were like, oh my God, Trump won. Why did that happen? He wasn't supposed to win. Clinton was supposed to win. And I said it was because he was the best marketer. And then so I newsjacked Trump's victory. I had an area of expertise, the marketing aspects of the election, and I put that area of expertise into the marketplace at the moment that people cared about it. If I had done it later, if I had done it even a few hours later, it wouldn't have been interesting to people. But at that point, it was fascinating to people. So I ended up getting myself quoted in probably a dozen international news stories as a result. And then about a week and a half later, I got the invitation for a speaking gig that I'm going to be delivering tomorrow. The invitation said, hey, David, we really want to hear about the marketing aspects of the presidential election. Would you come to Washington, D.C. and give a speech? So that's how it works. You get yourself noticed in the press, and you grow your business. You can actually make sales as a result of doing newsjacking.
And I think what was fascinating when I heard you speak about this as well was talking about the importance of the timing aspect, and also being cognizant there are times that, frankly, newsjacking will not necessarily be appropriate. It might not necessarily work.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
And as it's interesting, as I after watching you deliver that presentation, I noticed lots of examples. There was a case recently with United Airlines not being particularly great with one of their passengers, and I saw one of the Middle Eastern airlines really picking up on this and putting their own spin on it as well. So for someone just now listening, what is a good way maybe to ensure that they're always being alert to kind of what's going on, and how best they should think about, once they have an idea, okay, I have this angle related to my industry that works for this particular story. What's the best way of then kind of spreading that message?
That's an excellent question. So the first thing to keep in mind, and you've already said this, is that you have to be very quick. you have to, if you see an opportunity, you have to drop everything and take advantage of it right now. In many cases, tomorrow is too late, or even 3 hours is too late. You got to do it right now. So that's the first observation. The second observation is that you need to create some kind of content, online content, to get your take into the marketplace of ideas. So that might be a blog post. That's my preferred method, is a blog post. Or you could do a video, or you could do a live stream, or you could do a tweet, especially if you use an appropriate hashtag. These are all different ways that you can get your ideas out there. I'm also a really big fan of doing an infographic. So describing what's going on in the news as a graphical representation of data is a really great way to get your ideas into the market at the right moment. However, you need to be very cautious if you're going to attempt to do some newsjacking around any story that has a negative connotation. So, if somebody has just died, or if there's some kind of tragedy, or if somebody's house burns down or whatever, that might seem like it's an interesting opportunity for newsjacking because it's a popular story where people are talking about it. And that United Airlines story, as we're recording this, it's about a week and a half after that United Airlines story where they basically beat up a passenger and dragged him off of the plane, randomly choosing him to vacate his seat. Now that story certainly would be interesting for newsjacking. Like you mentioned, there's one of the Middle Eastern airlines that newsjacked it. Or if you're a lawyer, what a perfect story to newsjack, because you could say, here are your legal rights as a result of being a passenger on a plane. So a lawyer could do the newsjacking of that story. I myself newsjacked that story because I thought that the CEO of United Airlines, Mr. Munoz, did a terrible apology in the very beginning. So then I said, "Hey, this apology stinks." Basically, is what I said, because I'm a communications expert. I'm a marketing expert. So I have a legitimate tie to the story in that I can comment on the communications aspect of the story. However, it would not be appropriate, because it does have negative connotations, for a restaurant or some other sort of organization to newsjack, because the guy was hurt, the guy was injured, he had teeth busted out, he was bleeding. So you need to be very careful around a negative story, and the best kind of newsjacking works when you have a tie to that story, a legitimate tie that people say, "Oh, yeah, this organization or this person has a legitimate reason for newsjacking."
And one of your books, I know you've written, which I believe may be made into a movie as well, "Marketing the Moon," where you wrote about how NASA pioneered of what we think of today as content marketing, really, by using bylines and byline articles and product placement and all different things like that. And what I'm fascinated in your career as a marketing communications speaker, as an expert, can you maybe talk to us about a time where you were obviously working and studying all this that was happening in marketing, and you made a major insight, or you had that kind of light bulb moment yourself in your own work, and you went, "Oh, okay, this is the direction I want to be going with my work. These are the kind of messages I want to be getting out to the world"?
Oh, that's an awesome question, James. Thanks for that. There's a few cases in my life over the last 15 years. In the last 15 years, I've been doing my own thing, running my own business, and prior to that, for about 10 years, I worked at major companies. I started my career on a bond trading desk on Wall Street, and I was a terrible bond trader, but I learned a lot about how real-time information works being on a bond trading desk. My second set of jobs, I worked for a couple of different real-time news businesses. I worked for Thomson Reuters, I worked with Dow Jones and a couple of other companies, and I had a chance to learn about real-time news. So I was really lucky in that I worked in the online publishing business, and I worked in the real-time banking business early in my career, which was before the public web. And that gave me kind of an unfair advantage. And what it did was it allowed me to think about how marketing and communications was different than what most everybody was thinking that it was about, as the internet was really beginning to be the place that people were making their buying decisions. And I came up with two things that were transformational for me and my business, and for the many people who've read my books, heard me speak, in many cases it's transformational for their businesses because they apply these ideas. But the two ideas I look at as I saw a pattern that nobody else on the planet was seeing. And when those two times happened to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a pattern no one else is seeing. This is so freaking cool. I have to start writing about this. The first time that happened was about 2005. And what I recognized back in 2005 was that marketing on the web was not about advertising. It wasn't about paying for attention. It wasn't about the banner ads and buying email lists that everyone was doing. That wasn't the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing was that marketing on the web is really about publishing great content. So I wrote a couple of books about that, started to speak about that, and that's one of the books that became an international bestseller, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, which is all about how content is about publishing. And that was a pattern. Marketing is all about publishing. That was a pattern. The idea of marketing on the web as publishing content was a pattern that nobody else saw. The second time that happened to me, sort of drawing on my experience as a bond trader, was I recognized that as the rise of social networking and things like newsjacking were happening, that oh my gosh, marketing is morphing into, and communications is morphing into real time. It's real time. It's right now. It's not tomorrow. It's not 3 hours from now. It's right now, this second. Somebody is on your website right now. What are they doing? You can find out. The world is talking about you right now on Twitter. What are they saying? And on other social networks, what are they saying? You can do a live stream right this second of content and push it out there instantly right this moment. It's all about real time. And because I had been on a real-time bond desk, I saw a pattern that nobody else was seeing. The pattern, and this one came to me around 2009 or so, the pattern was, oh my gosh, social networking is really about real-time communications. It's about the idea that you can communicate instantly with your marketplace. So those were absolutely transformational for me and for my business because I was able to write books around those topics and develop speeches around those topics. And they were sufficiently interesting to people that they want to read those books and hear me speak. And I have some online courses that I've developed. One of them is called New Marketing Mastery, and the other one is called Master Newsjacking. Both of those courses also are around these patterns that I saw that nobody else was seeing.
I think you had a blog post recently on that kind of topic around marketing mindfulness. Mindful marketing, sorry. And what I thought was interesting about that, and I think for a lot of our listeners here, are very future focused, whether there's entrepreneurs or they're doing, the creative professionals, they're always kind of thinking ahead at maybe the expense of thinking in the present and thinking like now, as you mentioned, someone is on my website now. What is that experience like for them? So where did the kernel of that idea in that post come from?
Yeah, that's good question. Thank you for reading my blog carefully. The whole idea of marketing mindfulness came together for me around two different concepts coming together. And they only came together for me really recently in the last couple of months. The first concept is what we just spoke about, is the idea that the new tools of the web, the tools of social networking, things like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and all these other tools that we have available to us, allow instant communications. You can find out what's going on in the world right now. You can see what's happening right this second. But at the same time, the vast majority of business people, the vast majority of marketers, the vast majority of communicators, the vast majority of salespeople plan their initiatives ahead of time. They plan for what email marketing campaign they're going to do next week. They plan for what promotion they're going to do next month. They plan for a new product announcement next quarter, that kind of thing. And I recognize that. And the second thing that happened to me was I started to do some reading about the whole idea of mindfulness and meditation and things like that. And the basic concept around that, if I can be so bold as to sum up what all these books say, is be in the moment. So the books were saying to have a happy and healthy life, you need to be in the moment. Don't be thinking about what you're going to have for lunch or when you need to go to the airport tomorrow morning or what you're going to do on your vacation next month. I mean, sure, you can think about that every once in a while, but don't plan your life around and every moment around what you're going to do next. Be in the moment. What's happening right now? Who are you in the room with right now that you can speak with? What can you do right this moment to be mindful of what's happening in this wonderful life that we have at this exact moment? And you and I are talking to each other. This is great. I love doing this. James, we're talking right now, and there's no place I'd rather be right now than talking. And sure, when we get off the phone, then I'll move on to the next thing. So the idea of marketing mindfulness is your marketing needs to be in the moment. Your marketing needs to be when the market is right, not when you're ready. And that's a concept that a lot of people haven't really thought about before. It's about when your buyers are ready, when somebody's looking for you, not when you want to look for them.
And I think that's quite a big shift because obviously we hear lots in recent years about things like marketing automation and having funnels and different things set up, so which drip things out at a certain pace. And so is it really about then blending that well thought out, 12-month, 18-month kind of plans, and almost like when you're making a great, dish at home, a great meal, you just kind of like, okay, I want to throw in some paprika. I want to throw in some spice. I want to now I'm inspired to do this now. This is in season. This is what's happening now.
I think that's absolutely right. I'm not advocating that it's either or. I'm not advocating that you throw away your marketing plan and that you stop doing drip campaigns or that you don't plan for what you're going to present at the conference you're speaking at next month. Of course you should do those things. But the challenge is how do you lay on top of that the mindfulness and I think you've come up with a great example of hey, what produce looks delicious today? Maybe that's going to change my mind for what goes in my salad this afternoon. And that becomes the mindfulness of living in the moment, the mindfulness that says, hey, United Airlines just dragged a passenger down the aisle. I myself have extensive experience working with CEOs on communication strategy. The CEO of United screwed this up. So I am going to be in the moment, and I'm going to be mindful, and I'm going to create a piece of content right now that will put my idea into the marketplace when the moment is right, and drop the idea that I was planning on working on something that was going to be pushed out next month.
And you mentioned tools a little bit earlier as well. Do you have any online resources or tools or mobile apps like Evernote, for example, that you absolutely love using?
I don't have a lot that are like that. I'm kind of an old school guy when it comes to things like that. So no, there's nothing that is really going to blow people away. I'll mention one. I'm a big fan of something called Text Expander. It's an app for my Macintosh computer, and what it does is it allows you to create what they call snippets. A snippet is a group of words. It could even just be one word, but it's typically, for me, it's full paragraphs. So, for example, a snippet might be my address, my name and my address, my phone number, or a snippet might be a response to an email inquiry from people, a sort of a generic response that I can create. And what that snippet does is it allows you with just a couple of keystrokes to save hundreds or as many as you want of these individual snippets so you can use them really quickly, and it saves you from having to retype things.
That's
and it calculates. It's awesome, and it calculates how much time you've saved while you've used it. And I'm up to like 1,000 hours. I mean, 1,000 hours I've saved. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of time because, I use it, for example, when someone asks me if I'd be available to speak at their conference, I just type in speaking with a hashtag, and that becomes my snippet for my response to, hey, I'd love to speak at your event. Here's my fees. Here's how I travel, all that sort of stuff. And if I were to type it in each time, it would take forever.
And if you could recommend as well one book and one record, and I know that we have a little bit of a connection here through the Grateful Dead. There's been some. You had an interesting kind of side book related to the Grateful Dead. But if you could recommend just one book and one record to our listeners, what would they be?
Oh, isn't that an interesting question? I'm going to go both of them a little bit unusual. The book I would recommend is a book called How Music Works. It's by David Byrne, who is the leader of the Talking Heads, a band that I still love. I saw a bunch of times when I was when they were around in the early 1980s. And How Music Works is interesting to me because it's about music, yes, but you can take that concept of how music works and kind of make it a metaphor for how other things work. How does the news business work? How does marketing work? And so I found that to be a really interesting book, How Music Works. In terms of a music album, a record album, I would suggest, since you talked about the Grateful Dead, I wrote a book called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. And Grateful Dead fans called Deadheads generally believe that a concert that they performed in 1977 at Cornell University to be the best concert the Grateful Dead ever did. And the Grateful Dead, the band, is actually releasing a digitally remastered version of that concert, which is they've never done before. They've never released it before, and the only availability of these shows is through the underground network of people who have recorded the show. So the band themselves are going to be releasing that. It's going to come out in a couple of weeks in May of 2017. So we can all witness ourselves together a digitally remastered recording of what's considered the best Grateful Dead concert of all time.
Wonderful. And people go to jamestaylor.me and just type in David Meerman Scott. You're going to get all the links for these as well. I'll make sure we add these in the show notes. Final question for you, David. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, had to start from scratch. So you have all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years in marketing and communication, but no one knows you. You have no contacts. How would you restart?
Wow, that would be scary, wouldn't it? I think what's important is that you have to create content, number one, and you have to create content on your own real estate. What do I mean by that? A lot of people focus on developing a social network platform around the social networking tools, whether that's Twitter or Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever they might be, Snapchat. That's great. I think that is a good thing to do. However, those inbound links don't go to you. They go to those social networks. Yeah, they go to your page or your channel on the social networks, but they don't go to you personally. I think every person who's starting out, and if it were me starting out from scratch yet again, I would want to have my own real estate, and specifically in the form of a blog. It's also, for me, the longer form content of a blog post, 300, 400, 500, 600 words, is my sweet spot in terms of content creation. That's what I prefer. It's what I like to do. It's where I've gotten a lot of traction in my business. And when you create a blog post, it's indexed by Google, number one. It's indexed in real time, number two, and it lives forever. So if you create interesting blog posts, you will start to generate interest among the search engines in terms of providing links back to you, and that's where you can then hang your shingle out and and say, okay, here's what I do, here's how I do it. Thank you for visiting my blog, and here's how you can engage with me or hire me to do something. So I'm a really big fan of blogging. It's sort of an old school concept, but the reason I like it so much is that you own the real estate. It's not owned by somebody in San Francisco, like it is if you're doing Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all those other things.
Well, on that note, what is the best place for people then to go to read what you're writing and to connect with you and to find out more about your online courses, your keynotes, and the other things that you've got going on?
Excellent. So Twitter is DM Scott, DMSCOTT, and from there you can find links to some of my other things. David Meerman Scott, Google that. I use my middle name Meerman because I'm the only David Meerman Scott in the world. There's lots of David Scotts out there, but only one David Meerman Scott. If you like the idea of newsjacking, I've got a newsjacking site, which is newsjacking.com, and I've got some free resources there as well as an online course that you can learn everything you need to know about newsjacking.
Wonderful. We'll put all those on the show notes. David, thank you so much for coming on today. I know you've got a very busy schedule at the moment, speaking in different places, and I wish you all the best with your future newsjacking and online courses and everything else you have happening.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate it. You're a wonderful interviewer. I really enjoyed this conversation. Went by in like 3 seconds, even though we were on for half an hour.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.